All right, good morning, kids. Here we are again for another recorded lecture, only hopefully this one's actually going to work. We're going to go over some post-war economics. So the last couple days we were going over some of the Cold War stuff. We went over Cold War kind of round 1 and round 2. This goes back to the very beginning. This is more just an economic look at what's going on, and then we're going to talk about European integration. So you can see up on the screen, we're talking about incredible growth in Western Europe. Really, the combination of the Marshall Plan with currency reform equals an incredible economic boom for Western Europe. They are growing, they are reconstructing, everything is going great. And Western Germany is kind of the classic example of this. As we was on the lecture yesterday, they were referred to as the German miracle. You're going from a country that was completely bombed out at the end of World War II and is now one of the world's fastest growing economy. Now, these great economic times are derived from capitalism and economic planning, government intervention, a combination of the two. And what people are realizing is the Great Depression wasn't a failure of capitalism, like a lot of people were saying, which led to the rise of fascism, but it was a failure of too unregulated capitalism. And so the governments are really finding faith in these Keynesian measures. You remember Keynesian economics. Those are the counter-cyclical measures. When things are going down, the government has to get involved and start the circular flow again. Now, as part of this, France, Great Britain, and Italy all nationalized some of the key sectors of their economy, transportation, some industries, some mining. The government is running them. So these are uber socialist, uber Keynesian reforms that actually your homework tonight is going to get into a little bit more. Bless you, Mr. Robin.
Thank you, sir.
Now, one of the other issues is immigration in Europe. There's a labor shortage in Western Europe because there's a lot of people dead. And so a lot of the immigrants are coming in from former colonies or from current colonies that are soon going to be former colonies. And this causes a lot of social tensions. Here we're getting the announcement from Mr. Alban. All right, not sure where I was exactly, but these colonies, these immigrants are causing a lot of social tensions in Europe. Because, let's face it, Europe is largely a white and Protestant or Catholic continent, and now we're getting a lot of Africans, a lot of North Africans coming in, and there's very little chance for integration. There's very little chance for that Europe is going to allow them to become Europeans. This brings up a lot of questions that we're going to hit down the road about what is a European and what defines a European. Some other issues about growth is with this immigration, we combine a post-war baby boom because, well, after the war, people are really happy and they're glad to see each other again. So there's a baby boom, and then you subtract the war deaths that aren't happening anymore, and we see an incredible population increase. We see a baby boom just like we saw here in the United States. And then one of the big issues, and this is really largely what your homework is on tonight, the growth of the welfare state. Okay, Great Britain and France, and to a very lesser degree, Western Germany. In Great Britain, we call it the Labour Party, L-A-B-O-U-R, silly Brits. And they give high priority to social care. This ties into the key sectors of the economy getting nationalized. And stuff like Social Security, unemployment, state health care, progressive taxation all become the standard, all become the norm. Essentially, the state is taking the responsibility of taking care of its citizens. And that's going to be a big theme in the second half of the 20th century. Now, if you're looking at this section here, reshaping the global economy and currency stability. These are some big ideas that I gave you far more detail than you need to know, so I'm just going to kind of flow through it real quick. So Bretton Woods, essentially in 1944, a bunch of nations get together and decide they're going to have to figure out what to do with the global economy after the war. And so they put together some organizations. They put together the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. They put together the IMF and the World Bank. And these are all to help facilitate trade and help facilitate growth. Now, another issue Bretton Woods was dealing with was currency stability. Before the war, everybody had gotten off the gold standard, if you remember. And that caused massive inflation. So now they're trying to figure out what to do. Well, what they do essentially by 1958 is that the dollar, the American dollar, is worth the same as gold. So it's like the gold dollar standard. Um, but by the time we get to 1970, and I know this is going further than we are right now, but this is to tie up this topic. By the time we get to 1970, people are beginning to figure out that the dollar might be overvalued, that it's not really worth the same as gold. And so this begins the process called floating currencies. This is what we're familiar with today. This is the idea where different currencies change in relation to each other, change in relation to gold. This is where any of you have done currency exchange, anything like that. This is floating currency, and this comes out of World War II and the long attempt to stabilize the currency. Now, there were a lot of economists who were really freaked out about this, who didn't know how this was going to work, but in the end, it didn't really negatively affect the global economy. Okay, here we go. Hello, camera. Here we go for the second part of the lecture. This is about European integration, and this is a really big idea. This is one of those three big themes, if you remember, that was talked about at the end of the war, as the legacy of the war. So European integration. It became clear from a variety of sources that Europe's best future lay in unity. Much of Europe, although not Great Britain, saw that if they came together, they could be the answer to the challenge of the USSR and the United States. And then it also was an answer to their problems of decolonization. Now, kind of one of the first little baby steps towards integration was this thing called Benelux, where Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, so we're talking about an area about this big, real size, entered a free trade area. No tariffs, no anything, no kind of regulations, just totally open. And that worked well. So then eventually, some other countries decided they wanted to get on this, and they did the European Coal and Steel Community, the ECSC. So this is those Benelux countries, we call them, plus France, West Germany, and Italy. Now, this placed steel and coal production under genuine supranational authority. So not within France, not within Western Germany, but this organization as a whole is regulating the steel and coal. And so trade levels, tariffs with other countries, all wages were all the same within that ECSC. So this is Benelux started small. This gets a little bigger, but it's just about steel and coal. But now what we see is after a few more years, they want to expand this also. So they expand the common market. And this is with what they call the Treaty of Rome. This creates the EEC, the European Economic Community. That's one of the big ideas that we'll talk about, that term. This is a totally free trade area. So Benelux starts small as a free trade area. That trade area expands to France, West Germany, Italy, and Benelux, but it's only coal and steel. Now the EEC is that whole community. Hi, Mr. Malin. That whole community, but it is totally free trade. So you see kind of the progressive growth of what's going on. They have totally free trade within and a unified external tariff on everybody else. So it is like they are trading as one country. They work to remove all factors limiting trade, any quotas, any subsidies, any monopolies. Whoa, this camera has a mind of its own, children. And they really work hard to try to harmonize their social and economic policies also. And this is one of the first steps towards political integration. If you notice, everything so far has just been economic. And the EEC makes little baby steps towards political integration as well. Now, the European Community. Essentially what we get in 1967 is we had Benelux, the ECSC, and the EEC all kind of operating, overlapping with each other. The European Community combines all three of those into one. And it is really just an economic concept. Now, part of the European Community does create a European Parliament, which is political, but it has very little authority. But it is further political integration. but it never really takes off, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Now, with the European community, we see the reemergence of Charles de Gaulle, who you'll read about tonight, you've read about before, and we'll read about later as well. And he opposes a lot of this supranational authority. He's not a fan of it. So this is the leader of France who's opposing more supranational authority, like we saw him oppose the creation of a European army a couple days ago. Now, Great Britain stayed out of the ECSC. One second, sorry, a lot of excitement here this morning, as you can imagine. Now, Great Britain chose to stay out of the ECSC and the EEC. And there's a few reasons for this. One of the big ones is just their traditional isolationism. They liked being away from the continent. And they feel like this isolationism was reaffirmed by their war victory. Okay, yes, they got integrated in during the war and before the war, but now that they won, they're like, hey, the way we do things is right. Also, they're dealing with post-war reconstruction. They're trying to build. They're trying to figure out how to do things. And so that seems like an awful lot that they don't want to get involved with. And then there's something called the Commonwealth illusion. Now, you know, England is losing its empire. England's empire, they're de-empiring, they're decolonizing. And the Commonwealth is supposed to replace that empire, this relationship with some of their former imperial holdings, places like Canada, like South Africa, like Rhodesia, that choose to stay in the Commonwealth, Australia. But actually what we see happen is that was supposed to replace the benefits of empire. It really gives none of the benefits of empire and increasingly expensive and troublesome, especially with social issues in South Africa, problems in the former colonies of Rhodesia. So the Commonwealth isn't doing what it was supposed to do. And the other reason they're staying independent or staying out of those organizations is because of their special relationship with the United States, because that was their close tie. And they couldn't really be close with both. You can't really date both continental Europe and the United States, and they went to the dance with the U.S. But what we see is, as the war becomes more distant, as that relationship becomes a little more faded, the U.S. and Great Britain are kind of growing apart. So, after 1953, by 1953, excuse me, we see French production up 75%. West Germany production up 90%. That's that German miracle. Great Britain's is only up 30%. So something that they are doing is not working, and something that the continent is doing is working. So Great Britain requests entry into the European community in 1963, and they're rejected. De Gaulle doesn't allow them in. This is a very spiteful move, and he says Great Britain needs to decide whether they're in or out, and we're not letting them in. Now eventually, 1973, Great Britain is allowed in. Now, the results of this European integration, which is a huge, big idea. We're going to talk about it a few times over the course of this Cold War. Okay, the European community becomes an economic powerhouse. They become a true economic rival to the United States and Soviet Union. By the 1960s, they are responsible for 1/4 of the world's imports and 1/5 of the world's exports. So they are a major player. It also helps nurture reconciliation between Germany and France. You know, these are two enemies, and now they're on the same side, at least economically. It also created a common sense of destiny, that Europe, we're all in this together. Now, what we see is that there's very little desire for political integration. Places like to have their sovereignty. They like to have their autonomy, but they like the economic benefits that are coming. And in fact, people are going to be itching for more economic integration, more economic benefits, even while they're pushing against political. So, that's the lecture. Okay? Your homework tonight was another link. Oh, I guess I could have moved this thing as we were going through it, huh, kids? Sorry. Forgot about that. Anyway, so there's questions on that sheet for you to answer. I'm going to expect you to have that done Friday. Yeah, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking care of this. Be safe. Help your folks. Check on your neighbors. And have a good day. Hasta.